Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of GoGodotJam. And this is a special episode because we have a special guest. But before we dive right into it, I want to thank you all for your support. And if you are getting value from these events, and if you are liking this, and you also can support, please consider supporting. It's in the it's on the main website. The funds will also go to Godot and also to this event and other creators as well. So if you like these events, please do support us. It means a lot. In today's episode, as I said, probably you have seen already in the on the website and on the announcements. We have a special guest, a friend of mine who is a AAA game designer. And what we'll be discussing right now with him is what does a AAA game designer do in a studio? What are the workflows? If you have questions, we'll take from the chat as well. We also have the survey. It's in the link down below in the description. So there are a lot of ways. I know you have a lot of questions, especially about specific games, as Adolfo mentioned a couple of hours ago. But yeah, let's just dive in and see where we end up with the discussion. So I'd like to welcome Alex. So hey there. Now it's live. Now we can see each other.
Hello, hello.
By the way, if you can hear me and Alex, please do tell in the chat. I need to make sure that
I can
everything
try
is.
screaming louder if it helps
No,
for anyone at any point.
nah. I think it's it's good because I adjusted the sounds. So, Alex, before we start with the questions, can you present yourself a little?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Alex. I'm currently a lead game designer at Sumo Sheffield in the UK. Previously, I'd worked for Wargaming UK, Rebellion Games, Gameloft, and before that, a bunch of indie small studios from Romania.
Okay.
And that's me.
Yeah, that's a long story, and probably this shows like how like some steps how you can get in break into this industry. But yeah, we'll dive into this episode for more. And you also presented the kind of like the company history, like how your evolution was. But before we dive into this, let's get something out. Like let's address the elephant in the room. What is a game designer and what a game designer does? Because I've seen a lot of people that don't know for sure or estimate what a game designer is. So can you tell us, Alex?
Right, yeah. I so this is the million-dollar question. This is what everybody wants to know all the time. What is a game designer and what do they do? Mm. In theory, it's simple. In practice, it's a bit complicated. So the role of a game designer can differ quite a lot, can be different from company to company. Some game designers are a bit more hands down, some game designers are a bit more on paper. But in generally, a game designer is a problem solver. That's how I like to see us. We are the people that try to solve problems within a video game, and the problems that we usually the number one problem that we usually try to solve is how do you make it fun. That's the best problem to solve always, and the best feedback that you can get from other people. This needs to be more fun. We love cracking on that problem a lot. So from my perspective, for a game designer should be s- let's go through the theoretical part of it. So a game designer should be a creative person that can identify problems within a system and try to come up with solutions to solve those problems. A game designer will spend probably equal amounts of time both writing their designs down on paper. Let's say you're working on a shooter. You have to think about everything over there. How does the character move? How many guns does he have? How many bullets does each gun have? How much damage does each bullet have? How long is the reload time? And all of that nonsense. So you spend half of your time writing all of this stuff on paper in order to inform other departments like code, like art, and whoever else is involved, audio, SFX, VFX. And then probably you also spend an equal amount of time actually in an engine, the engine in which the company works or the engine that you're using, uh, to try to put that stuff together. Nobody should imagine that the game designer actually writes code or stuff like this. I think at most we are allowed to script stuff in some companies, but that once again depends from person to person. I think in essence this is the actual bit that differs a bit from reality. I've heard numerous people say, "Oh, I want to be a game designer," and I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Why?" Because I like being the idea guy, and I have lots of ideas. Everybody has lots of ideas. The people cooking the food at the company also have game ideas as well. That doesn't make them necessarily game designers. It's up for us to understand what ideas are worth it, and more importantly, to make them a reality, not just ideas, in with the scope of making a better game at the end of it.
Okay. Yeah, it feels like this is a much more comprehensive approach, and from this answer, that means that a game designer uh, is not should not write code, or it's, I mean, like, they have some might have some code knowledge or not. So there can be game designers from a different background that doesn't involve programming at all. I'm assuming for the art as well. So you don't need like artistic skills or any other skill in this department to become a game designer. What about level designer?
Now here's the thing. In theory, any amount of knowledge and any amount of experience into anything, literally anything, will help you a million times. If you're somebody that is more technical, let's say you are into programming, regardless of the language in which you code, that will help you get a better understanding of how some systems work in the background within the game and within the engine. So when you write down a design and a proposal in itself to send to code, hey guys, I want you to do that, because you have this technical knowledge, you can actually use it. You could be like, hey guys, so I'm thinking we make a list. In that list, we sort stuff like this, blah 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 blah. What any kind of mumbo jumbo that comes to mind. So that is definitely useful. You could have people that have some experience with art. Let's say Photoshop. Photoshop is a skill that you usually see nowadays in game designers, because not only do we write a design on paper, pictures really help. They say that a picture is worth a million words, right? So a lot of the times we try to put stuff together in whatever software we can to exemplify our idea to the team. Because while I do have a vision in my head, other people need to better understand that vision in order to help make it a reality. So yeah, when it comes to stuff like this, you can even take this like really off the beaten track. Like I believe I remember that the game designers at Naughty Dog, I think they had I'm not sure if it was a requirement or a welcome bonus in their job descriptions, but it was something like having knowledge in cinematography and stuff like it, and in Maya, and I'm like, wow, that's so far off my lane. But that's probably because their pipeline involves a lot of those things. Now, in terms of level design per se, I'm definitely not the best person to ask for level design tips and tricks. You would probably need a level designer, because while our jobs intertwined, it's only on a really small part of it. What I would say, I would imagine that for a level designer, uh, at at the very least, basic 3D modeling skills would help a lot, because if you're in the engine, you want to try out whatever you want to try out, it helps being able to create the shape and the size and the things that you want, and you can put them over there, see how the level feels with that in it. Maybe even put some collision on it if you want to, I don't know, make a vehicle game and see how the vehicle runs over there. And then probably a lot of Photoshop, because you'll be making a load of pictures of that level to inform art. Hey, so guys, this is supposed to be a canyon, when in reality it's just cubes and spheres and cylinders. Really ugly. We call this process the white boxing bit. Really ugly display of polygons over there, and you have to sell it. So once again, I'm imagining having video editing skills in order to put that picture into frame and actually start describing and drawing on top of it. Hey, I want a canyon over here. It would be awesome to have, I don't know, a plane that's burning over here to accentuate whatever is happening in that level. Then you have to do a ton of top down kind of imagery of how the level should go. Once again, a level designer could tell you way more about these kinds of things, but this is like off of the top of my head.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot. So yeah, I was asking about level designer because there's also a confusion between game designer and level designer. So if we just to summarize this, game designer is a person that thinks how the game should be, like how the character movement should be, how the combat should be, how the elements should fit together, but not exactly like how the levels should look or how the art should look or how the code should look. So basically, you just give directions, and the teams involved in art, in programming, in other areas, they do the actual game basically.
Normally, yes. So, I believe a nice analogy I saw to this when it comes to the difference between game design and level design, it's mostly that game design provides the tools and all of the what do I mean by tools? We think of the enemies, what their attacks are, what they do. We think of the weapons and the combat and the attack and everything that happens from a moment to moment perspective. And then the level designer, it's his job, his or her job, to create a level and placing those tools in so that they make sense, right? If you really want to make a really tense moment, tense scenario in your game, let's say it's a single player game, you put a lot of enemies in different spots, whatever, with no ammo pickups, right? So the game designer is the person that thought of the enemies, thought of the what is an ammo pickup, how much ammo does that ammo pickup have, and what weapons you have. And the level designer's role is then to actually create the space and how that encounter should take place
I
in theory.
understand. So if we have trouble with RNG, then it's your fault.
Yes, it's definitely our fault. We did
Okay.
that means that we did not manage to solve that problem properly. I did want to make one small note because you mentioned earlier that the game designer is in charge with, like the combat and that aspect and whatnot. Even within game design, there's especially in AAA, game designers usually specialize in one branch in particular, and that's what they become really good at. Preferably, the awesome stuff in working in AAA is, say you're making a third person action game. At one point, probably one member of the team is a combat designer, so that guy is a game designer who has a lot of experience designing combat systems for video games. So if you ever have something combat related that needs to be done, that's the person that definitely will design that system. If you're on the same team as him, right, and he's combat and I'm general game design, probably I do not touch combat. I do not touch the design behind combat because that's his job. I can only, I don't know, provide advice or suggestions. Hey, so I'm thinking of doing this and this. How does this fit in within your system? So that's the thing. There's a lot of multiple types of designers that can exist. There's combat, there's systems, there's economy designers. Actually, for RNG, you should probably blame those guys. Don't blame the game design, blame the economy designer if it's RNG related. What else do you have? I don't know. There's a lot of people that there's a lot of specialities within AAA particularly, which you don't usually see in an indie environment because the game designer is a wizard that wears all of the hats from my perspective.
Yeah, which is not only a game designer but a programmer, an artist, and
Yeah,
yeah,
especially that.
usually they do that. So most people that join the stream are indie game developers, but some do actually think of going to big studios or even middle level studios, and once you enter that point, then you are faced with some structures that you were not accustomed to before. And I hope that we can discuss a little in today's video, like what exactly, or I mean, we already touched the point that even even a game designer is so specialized. Like it can be like combat, or it can be so. This is like one main difference between AAA and indie. That you have mostly one person doing some particular stuff, and not one with multiple hats. Okay, let's. It seems, yeah, it seems like we are starting to get some questions, and we can get into like how to get into this job market, and what was your learning process in it. So X-Ray Dev asks, how did Alex get his role at his company? What was his career path? So exactly what I was saying.
That's a long story to go through. If it's just from the previous company to this company, I saw the role open. I really wanted to transition from senior to lead. I applied. I was the best candidate and I got the job. But if we're talking about the actual career path, how did I get into game design? And I don't know the process that it took to get over here, because at this point I think I've been working for 8 or 9 years and I'm a fresh lead at this point. I started on in September as a lead. I can tell that story because I think that might be more relevant to people than hey, yeah, so I saw a job a job posting online, I applied, interviewed, nailed it. So for me, the career path, I actually started out as a C++ programmer for writing software for cars, and that's how I originally started, strictly because back then uh, there weren't that many game studios around, and if they were, they had to be like have job roles open, and I think at the time there was no studio that had a job role that had a job opening open. So I started as a software programmer in C++. Then 6 months in, I got a call from an acquaintance from university, and he was like, "Aren't you the guy that always talks about video games at the university?" I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly me." Well, we have a job opening. We're a really small studio in the company. We're making mobile games, and we're working in Unity. This was really early on when Unity got released to the public. So I immediately quit my job. I took a massive pay cut, and I said, "Yes, no problem. I always wanted to make video games since I was 5." So I started out over there, worked at that company for like a year and a half, and released a couple of mobile games that I'm never gonna name because that's not the proudest part of my career so far. But I learned a lot, especially without having documentation for Unity back then. I learned a whole lot just by trial and error. Then after about a year and a half at that company, they went bankrupt, but a new company started, a new indie company appeared in the city in which I lived in, so I joined them as a game designer. What I knew back then about game designers is that you had to play a lot of games and read a lot of books, and I was like, I play a lot of games, I read a lot of books, I'm perfect for the job. Little did I know what game design actually meant, but I got the job because at least I had game dev experience. And in my previous company, we mostly worked in a two-man team. So it was an artist and myself, right? So I was both the programmer, I programmed the physics, I implemented the UI, implemented the art, monetization, whatever, and also tried to balance out whatever game design bit was over there. So I had a little bit of knowledge from this perspective. I worked over there for another year and a half, and I had an amazing boss over there that allowed me to fail a lot as I was learning the tropes of being a game designer and what it meant. Was super awesome. I learned a lot over there. Then after a year and a half, the company went bankrupt. Not because of me, I hope. So once again, I had to look for a job. So I joined one of the oldest indie companies in the country at that time. We did good. We worked on a game. We finished it. And as we were about to release it on Steam, this was way back when Steam Greenlight was a thing. The parent company of this company decided to kill the studio. So once again, I was left
The
without
company
work.
went bankrupt.
No, they didn't went bankrupt. They just decided to close this studio. So again, I had to look for work, and that's when I joined Gameloft as a multiplayer game designer. I spent a year over there. We launched a title. We launched Iron Blade. It was pretty cool. It was super awesome. It was my first time, like in a really structured studio, like you mentioned earlier, which has very clear pipelines, rule set, and these kinds of things. It was an amazing learning experience for me. After about a year over there, I said to myself, I really want to focus on PC and console kind of games. I want to get out of mobile because I've been working in mobile for quite a lot in the past. So then I looked for new horizons. It was pretty tough getting a job transitioning from mobile to PC because every single company definitely wanted me if I were to stay in mobile. When it came to PC and consoles, they didn't necessarily translate my game design experience in mobile on a one-to-one scale because they were like, "Oh, but this is PC console," and I'm like, "But that doesn't matter." Like, I think of games in a way more optimal way because we had to make them work on mobile. I'm even precious, so it was a tough cookie, but I ended up as a technical designer at Rebellion, and this is where my coding skills really came in. Uh, I worked over there, made engine improvements and pipeline improvements along with a team from the code department. We worked really well. We launched Strange Brigade. I got promoted as a senior game designer. Got moved on something for R&D. Did that. That was cool. Got to see how Houdini works. I never want to work in Houdini again because, dear Lord, that's a complicated piece of software. Then I got moved on Evil Genius 2, specifically to ensure to provide design from a feature designer and system designer perspective. They good, really enjoyed that as well. And then at one point, I decided that I want to try out something new. So that's when I ended up at Wargaming UK. I think, yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, that's what I did. I went to work for Wargaming UK for one of their new AAA unannounced projects, which is an incredible project, and I'm so sad that I can't talk about it, which was super awesome. That was basically seeing a superstar team, like super veterans from all over the earth, just piled into one place, and that was just mind blowing for me. I think I was one of the younger people in that team, and that was a crazy amount of time. That was a crazy time for me. Super awesome, incredible. The level of and quality bar out of the roof, and it was really fun. Uh, but at that point, I really wanted to become a lead, and it was quite clear for me at the place where I was because everybody was so experienced over there. It would take it would take me probably many years uh, many more years of experience before I could actually become a lead. So once again, I looked at the horizons, and after interviewing with several companies, some from Sweden, some from Poland, some from the UK, I decided to go with Sumo because I really like their attitude. I really like their portfolio. I felt financially stable so that the company won't go bankrupt after I join it. And yeah, here I am.
Yeah, and just to give people some context, some companies like Wargaming, they are mostly known for World of Tanks, I think. But they have what other games in the same style, right?
I'm not quite sure. I believe so,
Yeah.
but I'm not quite sure.
No, like the most known game from their studio,
Definitely World of Tanks. Yeah,
World of Tanks.
definitely
Okay.
World of Tanks.
Yeah. So I mean, like with this, like probably people can understand. Okay, Wargaming that creates World of Tanks. They also create World of other. Insert your insert like World War Two, like any vehicle or airplane or other stuff. And Sumo Digital, the company that you work on now, they're mostly known for I think how's it called, the puppet game or Sackboy.
Sackboy. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Sackboy. Yeah, but didn't they do the Little Big Planet before or just the Sackboy?
So at this point, I'm not sure if they made it or they co-developed. This is a thing
Uh,
nowadays in the industry where you have big studios that have to launch. a big game and maybe they're running out of time or they don't have enough team members, and that's where they contract another studio to co-develop. It's not
Uh-huh.
necessarily outsourcing per se, because the people that would work on it actually create the design themselves. They actually make the code themselves, because the studio that would contract you just doesn't have the human resource necessary to fit everything within their launch date window. That's when they go into code development.
Ah, I see.
And I
And
believe Sumo is also known for working on Forza, working on Hitman, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
yeah,
So
yeah, I
they've
checked
worked
this.
on pretty big titles over there.
Yeah, and also like X-Ray pointed out a lot of studios closing. I think like yeah, game development in general, in even in indie games, like it's more. I mean, there's a high chance that the next title will fail, and if it fails, and if you don't have other titles that don't fail, if you're relying on just one product, then yeah, your company might actually fail, and that's it. That's the end of the road for that company. So it's quite common, I think, in game development, like at least in AAA, to work on project based and then like to let people go once they finish the project, as I've read on in some
I
books.
wouldn't necessarily agree with letting people go at the end of the project. Usually, because working on a AAA game, that's a massive investment of time from from the employee's perspective. Like um, you spend at least 3 years of your life working on a product, 3 or more years, bigger titles, and I don't know, more. I don't know, games that push the quality bar in the industry, they take a lot of years. Like you look at something like Uncharted or God of War, that's 5 years minimum, maybe even more. Because at that point you at least have, say you started immediately from when the game just you start at point zero in its development. After 5 years, you have 5 years of experience in the company's proprietary engine, in the company's pipeline. You already know everybody, you know the departments, you know the leads. You are really valuable at that point. So laying people off at the end of the project is nonsense, because if you have to hire new people at any point in time, they have to learn the engine, they have to learn the pipeline, they have to learn the process. They might not be a good fit from that perspective. So I rarely heard of big studios, of AAA studios, laying people off at the end of the project. What I have heard, on the other hand, is usually with bigger studios, they have multiple projects that they're working on. You look at something like Ubisoft, and it has, I don't even know how many projects they work at any one point in time, like 8, 10, 12, I don't know. But for example, if during development for one of their projects, for whatever reason, they realize, you know what, it's not going to work. It's not going to be as fun. So let's cut our losses right now and just pull the plug on it. When a game gets canceled, that's when you might see layoffs. Because at that point, you're one project short, but you're 300 people
More.
extra.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm familiar with the Telltale company. Like when they had like major layoffs, and that happened in 2018, I think. That's why I said like I've seen like news of layoffs, but yeah, given the context, yeah, it might be the case that they get the project cancelled. So makes total sense.
Yep. And for a
Okay.
AAA studio to lose a project, that means a lot of money was invested over there. I think the biggest difference between AAA, AA, and indie is the actual amount of money that goes into a project. It's insane, and having to pull the plug on it probably is the best choice. If they're willing to pull the plug, they probably know that they're not going to get their money back and profit, so that you cut your losses short. But that's a big minus in the
Yeah.
wallet.
Yeah. And Ben says, since some designers don't always create code, what can the inputs and outputs of a game designer in a team? So basically, what do you do hands on? Like hands on, you go to your PC. What exactly do you do?
Right. So from this perspective, I believe the question was they don't always create code. in theory, a game designer is forbidden to write code. You are not allowed to submit code. You might have the possibility of using a scripting language to try to prototype whatever, an ability, an effect, whatever you want to prototype, but you're never allowed to actually write code. You can show your script to the code team and be like, this is what I'm trying to do, this is what I'm trying to get, and then we have our friends from code who are specialists in their domain, right? And they will write a polished and optimized version of that, because otherwise AAA games would come out with spaghetti code and really unoptimize the solutions. So in terms of design input and output for other departments, it's the actual design itself. So Mario jumps these many pixels because the game designer behind the game decided that this is how much Mario should jump in order to create enough of a challenge, but to be in order for it to be enough of a challenge, but also fun and entertaining, and be able to both jump on different enemy types that he's also designed and thought out of. It's these kinds of things that the designer does. In terms of what they do in engine, usually there's a lot of variable tweaking. Normally within a design, let's say that I want to make a new weapon, right? And let's say it's a science fiction game, so we're not bound by actual human rules of MP14 has 30 bullets in the magazine, right? Usually for weapons like this, when you would design them, you would explain how they work, you would explain any effects that they have. But when it comes to ammo or reload speed, you say things like in the document that you presented the team, you say things like it has X ammo and it reloads in Y seconds. So that's because once you get a prototype of that weapon working in the game, it's your job as the design owner for that weapon to go into the engine and start tweaking with the numbers. What feels good? Does this reload feel too slow for the game compared to the rest of the arsenal, or for this weapon, or for its weapon damage? So a lot of tweaking in a lot of different places is definitely one thing that the game designer does. And then it varies a lot. For example, when I was a technical designer, I did all of the puzzle doors. So that means a lot of scripting and interacting with 3D objects, playing, I don't know, using the engine's capabilities in order to create these puzzle doors. And the complexity could be massive. I don't know. I think I had a 3x3 kind of hieroglyph puzzle door, and I actually made it RNG so that you had to shoot the certain hieroglyphs would appear over there based on some symbols that would be generated on the entire level, scattered throughout the level, and I would have the level designer scatter them all over the place, but I would make the entire logic behind it. So I'd write the document. I want the puzzle door. I want it 3x3, and it works like this. I get some sort of a prototype from code and art, which is really ugly and really hideous and should never be in game for release. I then place it within the engine to test it out and then put together the logic for it, if the engine allows designers to do that. And yeah, I test it out and polish it and reiterate on design as needed.
Yeah, so it's a common thing for small indie devs to just like implement a weapon and leave it as is, and then move to the next thing, and then move to the next thing. But that's why you get comments for people saying your game is dull, or your game is boring, or I don't know, this kind of stuff. And like this precise polishing, like for every single stuff, to get just enough challenge, or like if you play a game and I mean, if a challenge is too hard, like really too hard, and you just skip it, like if it's optional, at some point you say, yeah, I don't care about it, I'll just skip it. Then it might be that the exact challenge level was placed there by a game designer, stating,
Most likely.
okay, yeah. And if you put too many challenges like this, and I've seen games, I tried games like where it was like, I mean, like if you take like the Souls games, I mean that challenges with logic. I mean, for just for people that really want those type of challenges, I don't want them. So even though I like the art style and stuff, I just I just not for me. I mean, I am more arcadey type. But yeah, if you experience like this kind of like challenge threshold or something being too easy or too hard or stuff like this, it's controlled by the game designer, and they have to completely reiterate. I think even go back, like if stuff changes and you have to go back in your previous work and work again, or I don't know,
Yeah, it depends.
revisit.
It really depends. So for things like challenge spikes, where abruptly the challenge is like massive, think about another thing. Um, sorry. Think of it this way. Let's say you're a team of 350 people trying to make a single player game, right? Let's say that on a particular level, you've got 120 people working on it, out of which 10 are game designers, right? For that particular level, you've got 10 different minds trying to place, I don't know, to make sure that the challenge is equal. But maybe I'm not that good at challenges, so the bit that I worked on isn't as challenging. But when Johnny came in, Johnny really likes, like one life no hit run challenges, and from his perspective, that's not too challenging. The work that he's doing. Also consider another thing. Let's say it's just one designer, one game designer for the entire level. So normally you should have a really nice flow for the challenge. What if that guy was sick? What if that guy quit his job and you had the replacement come in? Now somebody else had to pick up that bit and try to go with the original flow as best as they can while still having creative freedom. So usually when you see these kinds of spikes in challenge, this is what I expect that happened. There were different people working more or less on
Someone
the
got
same
sick.
thing. Yeah. So there were different
Yeah.
people working more or less on the same thing, and it creates inconsistency.
Mm, yeah, and if you don't understand this properly, just check out Justice League the movie, and then the Zack Snyder edition, and like see like the difference. Like he quit initially, and someone else had to continue the movie to make it. So it's kind of like similar stuff. Like if you quit in the middle of something, then someone needs to take over that idea. But of course, they have their own ideas, so that's kind of hard. Okay, X-Ray Dev asks what distinguishes between indie, double A, and triple A. Is just the size and the budget, or where do you draw the line?
So I think this is one of the most contentious questions in the industry. I don't think we have a proper solid definition of what is double A, what is triple A, and what is indie. Okay, so I think I think at this point budget should be the denominating factor that should separate them, because you can have an indie team of 50 people, and you can have a double A team of 100 people and or more, and this is the thing. So based on team size, I've stopped trying to differentiate them, because I've seen the weirdest scenarios. I've seen one man indie teams, I've seen 10-man indie teams, I've seen indie teams at 50 people that still claim or still are indie, maybe even more. I've seen lower double A projects in terms of team size, and for triple A, I've seen team sizes comparable to double A team sizes. So I think at that point it's strictly budget, because that budget will inform A, the amount of people that can work on it at any one point in time, and B, the quality bar that the game in theory should have, or maybe even just the scope of the game. You can make certain games with talented people of, let's say, 10 with $1 million, and you can make something completely different with the same team of 10 people with $300 million in your budget. So I think budget would be the limiting factor for me when it comes to differentiating between indie, double A, and triple A.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I think yeah, it depends probably. Like as you said, like the team size, yeah, it's so varied that it doesn't make sense to label them based on that. But though the difference between triple I and double A, or I don't know,
It's triple I.
like high budget indie game, but probably yeah, it's similar to double
I
A.
would say. I would think it's similarly. This kind of thing gets really distorted with every passing year because I don't know, new teams appear and they make amazing games, whether they're indie, AA or AAA. They make amazing games. So at that point, you're looking at the 20-man indie studio and you're like, that's AAA. But actually, they don't have funding, they don't have a publisher. They are indie, right? But it's AAA quality. So this is where it gets really, really weird really fast.
Yeah. So Sosasis asks, does it mean that if I make an indie game, and can it become like a double A, triple A game if enough money is funded on Kickstarter? And I'm thinking like Space Citizen or
Star Citizen.
Star Citizen or Kingdom Come Deliverance, or there are a couple of examples like this. Like these games probably start with low budget teams, or No Man's Sky. These games come to my mind. Like, so I think, yeah, it's possible if you start with an indie team, get enough funding, and then like, oh, you can get more people, more expert people, and increase the budget.
Yeah, because you always want to make a bigger game. If it were up to us, we'd always want to have like massive games. We're just limited by time and money. That's the deciding factor in any equation. Time and money.
Yeah, and we talked about how AAA companies usually see games as products, but most game developers, especially indie, come into game development pursuing their passion, right? But at some level, instead of like making your passion project, you're starting to make a product. Do you think that if you're working in a big company, you're more just an employee and not like working for your passion, or do you think like the passion is still there, still burning as the first day when you started?
Oh, the thing with this is, I think there's a bit of misconception when it comes to AAA. Wherever I've worked so far, I can't say that I've seen somebody that lacks passion. We all love what we do. Of course, 5 or 7 years into this, especially if it's 5 or 7 years into the same project, you can get pretty tired of the project and you can lose a little bit of passion. But everybody that works on a video game really wants, A, is doing it out of passion. B, it really wants it to be the best game that you can make. Again, the thing is with AAA games, because the scope usually is so big, like the experience, the maps, the whatever, even the rendering quality is amazing. Sacrifices have to be made in certain areas. Maybe certain areas of the game aren't as good as they could be. It kills us when the game gets released because once again, you have this amount of time based on the money that you have this amount of time until the game has to be done. At this point, you cannot extend it. We can't say stuff like this. You know what? We won't take a wage for a month. Just give us an extra 3 months, 5 months of development, because I'm sure there would be a lot of people that would be willing to do this. To, like get some extra time to polish some stuff. So usually when players encounter a lot of bugs in the game or stuff like this, they think, oh, the developers weren't passionate. Trust me, we work night and day and night, and we put our hearts into it. They are our little babies, and we hope to make the best games that we can. Sometimes we have enough time, sometimes we don't have enough time.
Yeah, and what about speaking of time? Because this is a sensitive question. Are all are all AAA studios bound to do crunching? That means extended overtime and stuff like this. It's like something that you are expected to do.
So this can depend and can vary from company to company. There are stories of the industry and of the large amounts of overtime and crunch that have happened. Personally, I've actually crunched more while working at an indie studio than a AAA studio, funnily enough. But I have turned down companies due to how much crunch they do. There must be one bit has to be understood. Crunching is not something that needs to exist in our industry. Crunching is a result of a mistake. And that mistake was somebody was doing planning for the game. Oh, we can fit this in and fit this in and fit this in until the game's release. And that person screwed up. That person did not plan properly. So because they didn't plan properly, this amount of work, now you need to make the same amount of work in this amount of time. And that's when people get asked to crunch. And it happens. It happens quite frequently because the bigger the scope of the game, the easier it is to make a planning mistake. And there's more or less this unspoken rule that at least 1 or 2 months before release, you should expect a little bit of crunching because that's the finish line for us. And that's the moment where you can imagine we know exactly how good the game is. We know exactly the state of it. We are aware that maybe we have quite a couple of bugs. Everybody, because we are so passionate about it, our game, like everyone is that's making games, I hope, we do our best. Sometimes you don't even need to tell people to do overtime or to crunch. They will do it themselves strictly because I want this to be the best that it can be. I can crunch and I'm not asked to crunch, for example.
Yeah, makes sense. And it's, I mean, it sometimes can feel like it's leveraging people's passion to overwork them. So yeah, it feels a little exaggerated, but yeah, I get the point. Like if you see like, oh, if I crunch this and this, then the game that comes out might be better. uh, by the way, like speaking of like released games, have you seen the latest Battlefield or
I
heard?
believe I have seen some videos on it. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's so they are releasing. They had the like the public uh, beta version or something like, and now they're releasing like on Friday, but it's a total mess. Like what from what I've seen right now, and it's a huge studio, like it's EA Dice, and you see this game and people say, oh, it's 2021, and are still like AAA games like released this buggy. Like you go through walls, yeah, you do stuff that you shouldn't be able to do, or stuff like this. So how is this possible? Like where did that problem come? Like did the managers fix the date and said like, oh, you need to finish this or else we'll just like release it without like assuring that all the bugs are fixed, or what do you think it's the problem?
So two things on this. A, I wouldn't want to make assumptions
Okay.
of my colleagues from Dice and from friends from over there. I'm sure they did their best. Some issues come up from the weirdest bugs or uh, weirdest, I don't know, coincidences. Like somebody submitted something that changes a shader, and now the entire AI system is broken. It's these kinds of things which can be more or less um, tough to catch. And I don't know. The second point that I want to say, in normally I haven't worked on a game that hasn't released with bugs. In bigger projects, you will never have zero bugs unless. So let's say a game should be releasing on X date. From that date moving forward, you dedicate a year and a half just for bug fixing. Maybe even then you won't get to zero bugs. It's definitely our duty for release to make sure that there are no showstoppers. This means basically a bug so bad that it basically kills the game. These are priority number one tickets for us. Making sure that there's no bug that completely blocks you from the game. So I don't know, you pick up this quest item and the quest log doesn't update, and this is the main story quest, so now you can't progress through the main story unless you uh, start the game from scratch. These are also high priority, high ticket bugs. Bugs where, I don't know, the horse starts levitating in the air randomly. What's we usually would ask our QA department, what's the reproduction rate on that bug? It's 1 in 100. We can we can put that on the back burner because we have more urgent bugs to fix. When release time comes, you manage to fix as many bugs as you manage to fix. Such is life. This is how much time you had. We probably will definitely look into like fixing them post release because we want to offer the best experience. But there will never be a AAA game that has 0 bugs. Never. On release, even post-release, they're too big, and there's too many things that can go wrong. And especially for PC, just different configurations of hardware can completely mess up the most random bits. Like I've seen stuff like sometime I had this experience one day. I went to work at the company that I worked on. I left the day before with the build, basically the progress that we made in the game. The build was super ace. Everything was working. The stuff that I just put in was working perfectly. The level, I could play it from top to bottom. I played it like 10 times that day. No issues whatsoever. I come in the next morning, everything is broken. Complete, unplayable. I can't even boot the game. I look through, like our. Sorry?
No, it's just like you can like everything working, and then you cannot even boot the game. Like,
Yeah, I can't even boot the game. No, this happens so
yeah, no,
common, so
it's
common. Yeah.
yeah.
So I come in the next day, I look through version control. There doesn't seem to be anything related to, I don't know, anything possible relate any submissions related to the game. And then we find out it's whatever plugin that audio put in that they're normally supposed to take it out. Somebody accidentally, when they updated the audio folder with the newest sounds, they accidentally left that tick box in, and now you can't even run the build. And I'm like, it's these kinds of small bits, and especially imagine 1 to 2 months before release when everybody's pushing and they're pushing to fix bugs. One tiny mistake like this can break a whole lot of systems.
Yeah, yeah, and this is like super relevant for software development as well. But yeah, trying to explain to someone that's not technical, like a manager or someone outside of the industry, like why does it take so much, or why does it have so many bugs, even though you are fixing them. So as you said, like everything was perfect. I fixed all the bugs, let's say, and then like the next day, boom, you have the bugs again, and it doesn't even work. So like it's just a big system that's interconnected, and like if one part in a completely different area you were unaware of changes, then like it may have like the domino effect, like, and then
Exactly. Yeah. And that's just
it's,
that's like the weirdest scenarios. That example where somebody changed something with the lighting shader and it completely destroyed our AI system for that level. To this day, I still don't understand what happened there. It doesn't
yeah.
make sense. How can something that's just the rendering affect AI that bad? But I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not.
maybe it was using the
Expert.
same like memory, like RAM memory part or something.
Maybe.
I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
But
I don't know.
it's crazy. We have some more questions. So Full Montes asks, since there are indie studios that are closer to AAA quality, do you think there's a possibility of AAA studios making smaller, simple games similar to indie games like Octopath Traveler?
I wouldn't know. That's for investors and publishers to decide. Would I want to work on smaller projects? Yes, and I believe it was Blizzard in the news some time ago where they said that they will be opening up a studio on site in Arvin to focus on mobile games. And this is not the Diablo discussion. To focus on mobile games because a lot of their developers were getting project fatigue. It really is very tiring to work on the same thing for like 5, 7 years, uh, considering how Blizzard would usually launch games. So for them, when they announced that, hey, we're opening up this mobile studio for us, a lot of their, not a lot of them, um, there was overall approval from their employees because they no longer had to go through the idea of, oh, okay, so we finish, let's say I finish Overwatch 2, then I work on whatever you work on, and that's another 7, 8 years of the same project on and on. At least this way, they could take a break. Hey, work on something for a year and a half, uh, start it from scratch and release it, and have these windows of, hey, release smaller stuff. uh, Personally, I wouldn't mind working on smaller stuff because it's very hit or miss with big stuff, but I don't mind. At the same time, it's super awesome when you can work on big stuff big games because you push some sort of boundaries, whether it's the rendering department that pushes it, or it's game design, like creating super innovative systems, or really elegant solutions to, I don't know, inventory. This is the kind of stuff that keeps me awake at night. A really good and pertinent inventory system. This is what makes me happy.
Yeah, and even though people say, "Oh, indie is where like the innovation happens," sometimes you're just limited by budget. Like
Yep.
independent game developers can only do so much. I mean, they can innovate like in gameplay or in storytelling, but for example, like in rendering technologies, like getting the latest greatest RTX, or I don't know what technology comes where you need like models with I don't know how many materials like on top of them and stuff. It's basically it's impossible uh, because of the budget limit. So if you want like the bleeding edge of innovation, you cannot get it in some areas. Of course, yeah, for storytelling, yeah, it works. But if you want more than that,
Yeah. Once again, yeah, I think it's based on budget, and it's based on the intention for the game. Like I remember when not Uncharted, The Last of Us 2 came out, I was blown away by the rope physics. And you need to understand, somebody made a decision, a management decision over there. We will spend the next 3 to 6 months working on a bit that just makes this rope have proper physics, because they really cared about that bit. And from my perspective as a developer, I loved seeing that. This is why we don't put ropes in video games, or if we make them, we fake them so bad, because actually making physics for a rope the way that it was presented in The Last of Us 2, that's just such a time consumer, and you have to wonder how much will this count for the player. Like you mentioned Dark Souls earlier. From Software is known of having so much content that they actually go out of their way to hide it from the players, right? So you have an entire team of, I don't know, 60 artists, 40 programmers, and whatever, how many designers making this humongous level and this awesome boss fight and audio and whatever, and they hide it from the player. And you know that when the game will launch, not every player will see it, because it's not necessarily a linear game. And there will be players that finish the game and they will never see all of the work that you did. And it kills you inside. It really does.
so yeah, it's actually I never thought about this. Like people not experiencing like if it's a non-linear game or like it has multiple endings or stuff. I mean, you can go Mass Effect 3 route and make the same ending, just like change the hue of the explosions, and boom, you have multiple endings. Or you can have like completely multiple endings and you just don't see them as a player. And yeah, it's like it's the same with code. Like that's the fun part. Like I think like it was like or a lot of percentage of the code doesn't actually get executed when someone runs a game or someone runs a piece of software, just because of the if and else structures and switches and stuff like this. So you basically end up with a much smaller subset of what actually is built there. So
Yep.
either it's code, or programmers can be sad that their code is not run entirely, even though they
Yeah.
worked on it. or,
Yeah, that's fair.
or yeah, designers are sad that yeah, their art or other stuff was not seen. X-Ray Dev asks, do you follow a pretty regular work schedule, 9 to 5, Monday, Friday? Um, or do
Yeah.
you?
In theory, yes. And in theory, I believe in practice in the last 2 years. Maybe I do half an hour or an hour every here and there every week, because I don't know, something really needs to get done, and I just don't want to leave it up for future Alex. I want present Alex to finish this and not make it future Alex's problem. So personally, I've been very lucky with crunching. I didn't have to crunch at Wargaming, which was super awesome, and even around that entire place in my career, I really didn't have to crunch. I've had colleagues at other companies that have had to crunch immensely, and personally, I have turned down companies when moving jobs throughout my career, I definitely either avoided them or turned them down because they were like, "Are you okay to crunch from the first week?" And I'm like, "No, no, I want to have a life. I
Yeah.
want these kinds of things."
Yeah, I think I've been to an interview like they asked me, "Are you okay with like overtime?" And I said like, "Well, I think yeah, overtime is like bad planning from." And they're like, "What the fuck?" And then like I received the call next days. Yeah, we'll not continue with you.
Yeah, yeah, but
So
this is usually what it is. It's just bad planning. Somebody messed up planning. And or it could be something else. To be fair, let's not put it on producers and project managers at this point because it's not just them. Let's say I get tasked with Alex uh design the final encounter, right? Let's say we're working on a linear single player game, design the final encounter in the game, right? And I would get asked previously, I would get asked, how long do you think it's gonna take you, Alex? And I try to estimate based on all of the work I've previously done. Guys, I think it's gonna take me a month and a half, 2 months. Cool. And everybody plans around my 2 months. That means maybe art doesn't start work until I have managed to make a prototype out of that, right? Because they're waiting on me. They need to make sure that the art that they're going to be creating is final, right? Because you don't iterate that much because art is expensive. So if Alex is late on delivering that prototype, that causes delays for art, which then cause delays for VFX, which then cause delays for sound, and so on and so forth. So it's not necessarily that one person planned something badly, but maybe even when we as developers we gave estimates, maybe they weren't the right estimates.
yeah, and it gets this change direction if someone depends on your work, or else they cannot just continue. And yeah, people are not paid to just randomly idle by. so
Yeah,
so they need to do something, right? So their managers like they say, okay, so you need to do it. Okay, I didn't get this from the designer, and well, then you have to assume, or I don't know what's the process, but yeah, it might be tough, like to manage bigger teams, I'd say, in
definitely.
AAA. I think even in smaller teams, like even like if you take game jam teams, I've heard a lot of stories that the teams didn't work together, and they disbanded fast. I think it's the same. Like it was, of course, like different concepts, different opinions, and but it's also different ways of working. And if you work double time as someone and you depend on that person, then you'll feel like I'm doing all the work and that person isn't doing anything, or something like that.
Yeah, the thing with big teams, and usually this comes back to AAA, there are processes, very clear processes on how something gets done. Like because you can't maintain communication when you're 300 people big or bigger. Like there are projects that are 800 people working on it, right? You cannot maintain communication between everybody, so you need a very strict not very strict, but you need a very clear and defined pipeline on how things get done and when do they get done, so that art doesn't start working on whatever character that they think that design will be working on unless design actually finishes their design for that, and then art can look into that. So to give an example in term how these pipelines usually look like, and they're more or less similar. Like if you've worked in one AAA, you're pretty much familiar with the pipeline for another company when it comes to design. Usually, somebody from the design team is tasked with, hey, come up with I don't know, come up with a new enemy, right? And they'll make a very brief high level pitch of a character where we don't necessarily care about how the character looks and stuff like this. We care about what do they do. Well, this character can double jump, and sorry, this enemy can double jump. It's immune to fire, and we want this enemy in the game because you have to actually have a reasoning for that enemy. We want this enemy in the game because currently all of our enemies are grounded, and this would be the first enemy that would integrate verticality within our game. So it's cool. It's cool. It's different. It engages the player in other ways that they were previously engaged. They send that to the lead for approval. The lead approves it. If the design makes sense, right, for the game, for the project, for the other enemies that were designed, the lead approves it. Then the other guy, then the original person, sits down and makes a way more detailed version of that enemy that they originally pitched at high level. Now you go into details. So with double jumps this frequently, their jump is this different from the player. They also have these attacks and these attacks. And when we say they're immune to fire, they are immune to fire, but they're also immune to electricity if they're in water. And you start thinking of like these massive, very clear scenarios. That goes to approval again. If it gets approved, then you probably pass that design around to all of the teams. You show it to code, you show it to art, you show it to everybody. Everybody has to be on board with it. And maybe art can say, yeah, cool, we can't double jump because our level sizes, the way that we've thought them out, they're too small. You cannot have double jump. If you want, we can make him jump, and then when he goes down, he kind of levitates down. Does that work for you guys? So now design has to redesign that character with new restrictions in mind. And you go through this process until you get a thumbs up from all of the departments, and then all of the departments actually make it.
Yeah, so I think you kind of nailed two questions from the chat. So Ben said, how much do game designers care about technical feasibility? So probably this means like how, like, exactly like what are like the technical restrictions of what you can achieve. Like let's say, I mean, I want like a massive MMO with like 1 million players on the server. Like it's impossible, right? So there are like technical restrictions, and Full Montis asks how much probably creative freedom you have in a project, and
Full creative freedom.
yeah, in the limits of discussing with your lead, like the top lead and the other departments. Because if
I mean, yes,
someone doesn't approve, like, oh, we have like small caves and you cannot double jump, you cannot say no. I want double jump.
yeah, no, yeah, completely agree. So with the whole double jump example, we were all mature enough to understand in that
Yeah, yeah,
hypothetical situation why the double jump was turned down. It wasn't because people were like, oh, we don't like double jump. No, it was from in that hypothetical scenario. Bro, we don't, the level isn't big enough, high enough, right? So when the character will double jump, it'll look weird to the player and it will just feel awkward. So everybody's trying to make the best game that they can, and every single department tries to push for the best from their department. Like as a designer, I would love to make an entire game that's fully innovative and stuff like this, but that's not necessarily the best choice for your game. You can use something that works. You can perfect it even more, right? But you can use something that works and focus to innovate on the really important stuff. If and where you need to. Um, if in that example that you gave earlier, if the design gets to the lead for approval and it gets shut down, there's probably a very good reason why it gets shut down. If you have, um, I don't know, a game with airplanes fighting, right? And all of a sudden you want a flying giraffe as another character over there, of course the lead will be like, I don't know what you're doing in your free time, but you gotta come back to reality. This is not the game that we're making. If you want to make flying giraffes, work on something else. But this is, we have played. So this is obviously something that needs to be kept in mind. Sometimes it's not quite clear in terms of vision how far we can go. So probably our first design is really pushing it how far we can actually go. For example, if somebody says make a laser gun, right? And that's very open, right? In general, normally when you'd be tasked with something, it's way more specific. Try to come up with a weapon that's good at defeating multiple enemies at a time, right? This is the kind of specification you'd get, and you can go crazy on it. When you go really, really crazy, you might go too far from the art style. You might go too far from the original vision of the game. So that's when the lead comes back to you and he's like, Johnny, Really awesome stuff, really good stuff. Not for this game, Johnny. Different game, Johnny. Let's try to think about stuff. Or maybe the cost for it is too high in terms of time.
Yeah. Yeah, and but speak coming back a little to the double jump example. So how could the art or like level design like a level shouldn't be like the game designer says like initially, no, I want this game to have double jump, and then like that decision to go to all departments, and like when the level design picks up like, oh, this game has double jumps, so this means that our levels should support.
In theory, yes. In that hypothetical scenario that I gave, I was mostly my scenario would have assumed so far for half of the game we only had grounded enemies, and probably this was the specification that was given to level design. Oh yes, our enemies are grounded, and halfway through development, somebody just said,
Ah,
"You know what? I want an enemy that does double jump," and you forget that that was the original statement or the original vision.
I see.
Grounded enemies. So then level design or art will kindly remind you that's not how it. We already built 5 levels out of 10, right? Already built 5 them. You can't support double jump. So either we make the following levels to support that, but then you can't use this enemy for 5 levels. So it becomes a back and forth. Something's gotta give somewhere. But normally, if we would say, hey, the game has to support double jump, normally you'd look at the player's mechanics first. What can the player do? This is what's ground zero. What can the player do? The player can jump. Cool. Can he double jump? If you're not sure, you put a maybe in the design. You're right, maybe. We'll see. We'll see. But with that maybe, art already leaves space, right? They already leave room in case that maybe becomes a yes.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, no, but yeah, it's difficult. So if the project is like halfway done, you cannot like really make groundbreaking changes. I mean, the groundbreaking changes or the changes that define a game, like in terms of gameplay, in terms of enemy design, you're either stuck with what you already have in the beginning, or just for a couple of new levels that haven't been created yet, or for
Yep.
art, or so. Yeah, actually, that makes like sense, taking into account like that some games do have some enemy types like as they go, and it's also like a creative decision to kind of have this like AI complexity rising. Like, okay, initially I have like enemies that are easy to kill, and then I have enemies with shields that have to do some tricks to remove the shields first. But yeah, shield in this case the shields would still work.
Yep.
Yeah. So X-Ray Dev asks, do you ever wish you had more creative freedom?
Nah, I'm good. I'm super good. Like the stuff that my former leads had to see. Oh dear Lord. Poor people. I pity some of my former leads for how crazy my designs were, and I was, like, basically imagine that we were 80% production done, and I was tasked to do something, and I created this monstrous design. You'd have to delay the game for about, I don't know, like 6 months just to get my stuff in, and they were like, it's really cool, really neat. We don't have to. What were you thinking? And then when I took 2 steps back, I realized, wow, this is gonna take too much work to actually get this in, and it's my fault at that point. It really is my fault. I should have been aware. Hey, I'm we're always aware of the release date, right? Internally, we know when the game is always going to be released, even though it's not announced to the public. We already have more or less
Guesstimates, yeah.
yeah, not necessarily a guesstimate. We pretty much know. We pretty much know plus minus 3 months. Let's put it like this. We know plus minus 3 months. So it's crazy for a designer to come up, like in the last 2 3 months, he wants a new enemy or he wants a new weapon. No, in the last 2 or 3 months, you finish the tweaking that you have to do, and you're on bug killing duty. That's what you do. You don't keep on creating. So that was my mistake back then, right? Like
Yeah.
towards the end of the project, I wanted this entire new system added in the game that would have ramifications in everything. That would have been, and I was like, yeah, look at this. lead. What do you think? And they're like, dear Lord, what's up with
They're
this game?
face palming, right? Like,
Yeah,
ah, like,
they're
ah.
face palming. So yeah, no, like I
Yeah,
always felt I had creative freedom. I don't know why people, sorry, why there is this myth that in AAA there's not creativity or there's not originality. I see it anytime I play any kind of game. Some games come out better and some games don't.
yeah,
But it's not for lack of trying from the devs.
yeah. No, I mean, like people when they're seeing sequels, especially like you see, like I don't know, like the sports games, like yeah. You basically you change the name. Of course, they have to I don't know, make players' faces more realistic, or I don't know some other stuff. But in the end, like what can you do? Like if you're just like churning sequels of kind of the same type of a game, it- yeah, at some point there's not enough room for creativity, or I don't know.
I guess.
Yeah,
I guess. I normally don't like to comment on other games because
uh, yeah,
I know
understand.
that I know whenever I've worked on a project that got released, of course I go on the Steam forums. Of course I see you'll mostly see people complain. You won't see the congratulations or the really wow I really love that part. No, people will be like, this is bugged, this doesn't work, this is garbage. Oh, how could you come up with something like this? And it on a personal level it hurts um, because you know you did your best. Of course, not every painting is gonna be as great as like Michelangelo's chapel and stuff like this. It's a process. I'm still learning how to make better designs and better games. And for some of the things that player call, oh, this is dumb, and I look at that bit and I'm like, I know, but we were really running short on time. That was the best decision that I could have taken with the resources that we had left. Trust me, it could have been way worse, and we explored way worse. It could have been so much worse, but this was the best that we could have had. If I had another, and this is where the cost thing comes. If I had another week, another month, another year, of course, none of those bad things would have been there. But other bad things would have been there because other choices had to be
Made, yeah,
sacrificed. Yeah.
yeah, and I think if probably if anyone released the game, like it doesn't matter the budget or the size of the studio, you will be getting eventually those negative reviews and those negative comments that your game is trash and your work is garbage, or I don't know, like I got them. Initially I felt the pain, but then I just like took a step back and left off those I mean, like if we want to continue doing what we want, we need to realize that these people will be there, like they will be there and they will put like their bad opinions. Of course, I like to point out No Man's Sky in this regard. Like there is also a video called like the fall and rise of No Man's Sky, and it's funny because they actually had bad reviews and now they're having like mostly positive reviews. So it can go the other direction as well. Like if you keep at it and get better and get better.
The thing is that there will never be a perfect game that everybody will enjoy. Some people love sports games, some people don't like sports games. Some people like shooters, some people like strategy games, and they don't like the other bit. So you can't make the perfect game. And with that in mind, whenever you see bad feedback, don't take it personal. Um, it hurts a bit, yeah, when I see it, but I don't take it personal. Like when they call a specific thing that I designed, they call it garbage and the worst choice, and oh my god, please fire that guy. There probably was a very good reason why we chose to do it the way that we did it that way. And there's always consideration. Nothing gets put in the game just because it's easy or it's cheap to put in the game. Nothing is cheap. Everything is a very well planned out decision. Sometimes we make mistakes, but yeah, never take it personally, especially if you're working on an indie game, whether it's your first or your 10th, and I don't know, people call you names or say that your work is very poor. Don't take it personally. At the same time, there's probably someone else over there that really liked your game. And I remember for Strange Brigade, I think it was on Strange Brigade. there were some really nice messages, like, hey, I played this game with my wife. It was the first game that I actually played together with my wife in co-op. We would actually print those out, and we put that in the office because it's a reminder for all of us. Yes, we are passionate. Yes, we love what we do, but the biggest joy that we have is when we see that people really love doing it. And I did want to put another mention on what I was saying earlier, especially in AAA. We are so aware of the fact that people have different tastes. When we are designing something, we are designing for a very specific target audience, right? So maybe that target audience is 24 to 35-year-olds, first-person shooters, right? Hardcore third-person shooters. Let's put it like that. So
Hardcore,
at
yeah.
that point, if somebody says, "Oh, I need to give an example. I don't know. Somebody comes, sorry, we release the game with this target audience in mind, right? And we get a player that says, "Oh, I come from X game, which maybe isn't a hardcore first-person shooter," and they start dishing on our game. From that perspective, well, I would have never expected you to like this game. It wasn't made for you, right?
Ah,
You come
yeah.
from Y type of game. We made hardcore first person shooter. Oh, I normally play RTS games, then I don't care. I really do not care that you don't like our game if you come from RTS games. It wasn't meant for you. We deliberately took specific design decisions for the target audience, things that they will like. And we're trying to serve them with this game.
Yeah, yeah. This is coming back to the Souls example. Like, I wouldn't play those type of games because they are specifically made for people that really want a strong challenge, and they are there and they really enjoy those games. And I've seen playthroughs and they really enjoy them. I do not, but yeah, what can I do? But yeah, at some point you do want to try something else, and if it's too of I don't know, like let's say I want to try racing and you end up with a simulator game, right? And those are made for like specific racing fans that like know every single stuff, that like have custom rigs. And of course, like it's really hard to control the car, so you should go for arcade racing in that case, or there are more like, I don't know, like usually arcade games in gameplay are like that, like they catch more people.
Yeah, but that particular example with arcade versus simulation kind of racing games, that's a super good example. If you launch a simulation game and your audience is the audience that likes simulation, if you have someone come in being like, "Hey, I played the latest Need for Speed and I think your game is garbage." Fair point, buddy. I don't care. This is not Need for Speed. This is whatever simulation racing game I've just released. Yes, but you should change it. No, you are not the target audience. The people that like simulation,
Yeah, enjoy
they
it.
they are the people that I'm trying to cater with this game. I can't make a game that fits everyone.
Yeah. So Ben asks exactly this: do you like designing games to be a bit more generic, so that more people like it, or create more niche games?
In theory, whenever personally I try to come up with a design, and now with the team that I'm in charge of, whenever we design anything, any mechanic, any system, anything, first and foremost will always be target audience. Like if we do not meet, if the design does not appeal to the target audience, by default, I deny the design. I kill it, and I say, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board. Once we have satisfied the target audience, I do like to try to push, okay, can we make it so more people like this? The thing is, if you're making it for so that more people will like it, the highest probability of people buying your game, right, is the target audience. People outside of your target audience might not be interested in your game. So while we do try to fit, like if it's a game for kids, let's try to add a bit more depth so that if the kids are playing with their parents, the parent actually is engaged, actually has some depth in the game that he can enjoy. If it's a game for adults, no, sorry, if it's a super hardcore game, can we add any accessibility options to make it, like so that the player can choose to maybe try to make it less hardcore, but then it's striving away. So personally, I would love to make a game that everybody would love to play it. I know it's impossible. I stopped doing that. I've worked on enough games to realize that is impossible. My biggest concern is, can I satisfy the public that I'm catering to, that the game is designed for? If I could get 100% satisfaction from the target audience, I could die tomorrow. But that will never happen as well. That will
Yeah.
never happen either.
Yeah, and another example for this that comes into my mind is Subnautica. That's of course catered to survival fans, but it also has the option to remove like food, water, and stuff like
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
And actually, I try playing it without those because I don't like that type of mechanics. So
Yep.
yeah, that's what I say. I mean, if it's a hardcore survival game, I would not touch it because I just don't like that mechanic. But for people that enjoyed that, if they don't see that you have a hunger meter and a thirst meter, then it's a garbage game.
Yeah,
So
no, no, I completely relate to that. I also played it, and my partner played it, and she disabled the survival mechanics. While I told her I can't understand how you can play this game without the survival mechanic. What's the point? What's the point of playing it without survival?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, let's get into some people questions. Some from the survey. I put a small survey, but yeah, there are not so many questions, so you don't have to worry. How many years does a AA or AAA game take to make?
it really depends on the company and the budget. So normally for a double A game could be anywhere between a year and a half and let's say 3 years. For AAA, I expect 3 years to be the minimum, and it can go further into the future, like 5 years on average, 6 years. The more high profile projects really take 6 to 7 to 8 years to make.
Yeah. And I remember a story from Ubisoft that had two teams work on Assassin's Creed so that they release it every year.
Yeah,
So-
yeah,
but they kind of like oversaturated the market. So, so they removed that strategy. But yeah, it usually, like when you see this kind of like yearly releases, probably there are more teams actually, like
yeah,
completely
definitely,
different teams that are working on different projects entirely.
definitely, yeah, definitely.
What kind of things do you do day to day while you're working in a game company?
The high level pitch is, from in my experience, it's a lot of Word, it's a lot of Excel, and I'm spending a lot of time in meetings. As lead, I have to make sure that everybody is clear about everything, that my team perfectly understands the vision of the game, that the designs that my team has provided, um, like get circulated around, and that I go and talk to the lead from code. Hey, do you have any concerns or red flags in regards to this mechanic? If so, how can we achieve it? So yeah, that's a lot of my day-to-day job in a high level. As a lead, normally I review stuff, I help with planning. So right now, if the game that I'm currently working on is gonna have delays, it's gonna be my fault because I'm making planning as well, right? I'm part of the planning process as well. Yeah, and it's also a lot of syncing with my superiors, with the director of design and his direct superior, to make sure that I'm always aware of the vision of the game, that I always remember, this is the target audience, this is the things that we know that they like. Let's make sure we appeal to that and we deliver the best experience. And yeah, it's reviews, it's managing a team with everything good that comes out of this, meaning seeing awesome stuff that they get to create and being like, wow, I can just sit back like this and have an entire team make the most awesome game possible. But it also comes with downsides, like maybe someone isn't in a really creative phase. How do you manage that? How do you set expectations for their tasks? How do you delay the tasks? If you delay the tasks, you're probably causing other delays for other departments. How do you make that work in the long run? These are the kinds of issues that I face now as a lead.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. It's probably also more people skills than just game development skills as well.
Definitely, definitely. In theory, I would love to be able to do some game design, but I legitimately do not have enough hours in the day for all of the things that I would want to do in a day as a lead. Now, compared to when I was, I don't know, senior or a mid or a junior, when I was a senior, I knew that, hey, Alex, this is your task. You have 5 days to do it. Please provide me with, like in 5 days, please provide me with a new enemy. And that's that. That was super clear. No surprises, no nothing. I would have 5 days to make that. Now, as a lead, I have to always see the bigger picture and make sure that the design is solid. We have enough time to iterate. We solve any problems that we have in our pipeline, come up with new pipelines that work better for my team, for all the other teams, solve communication issues, especially with work from home. Communication is a nightmare in bigger studios. Not a nightmare, but it has challenges.
Yeah. A lot of companies, not only game-related companies. Okay, moving on. At what point in development should the custom assets be made? Is it good idea to use placeholders for faster prototyping?
Definitely, definitely. Like, I don't want to see any piece of actual 3D model, proper 3D model, unless the prototype has been already approved. So the way that I've seen pipelines work, and I completely agree with this kind of pipeline. Designer does the really high level pitch. We get the high level pitch before, even preferably even before going into the second stage where it's a more detailed document. I would want to see that prototype. Maybe that there's a lot of times in game design where the mechanic sounds fun in your head or on paper, and when you actually put it in game, it's so boring. It's so incredibly boring, you have no idea. So because of that, you want to put something in a game that's as representative as possible as the mechanic or the feature that you want, and see how it feels. Pick up a controller or mouse and keyboard, whatever your playstyle is, and see how it feels. Prototype first, and don't invest into assets. I actually have a rule for my team. If you prototype something and I see VFX or SFX, we're gonna have a very long conversation because you're wasting time making sure you trigger sparkles and whatever and audio for something that we don't even know we want to work on, right? A prototype is just this, a proof of fun, where fun is a very broad word, but it's a proof of fun that that thing could be enjoyable. Once we know it's enjoyable, we can go crazy on it, on putting assets and putting UI and all of that. But until then, none of that from my perspective, because it's a waste of time.
Yeah, it's totally legit, and some people just dive into everything at once, and it's also sunken cost. So now I have these assets, but this mechanic kind of sucks. So I'm left with like, what option do I have? Um, Next question: what does it cost to make a AAA project? Probably it's also very broad question.
It's very, very, very broad.
Like
It depends.
minimum and maximum can be infinite. Minimum.
It really depends. I couldn't give you a minimum because it really depends. So I've worked on big projects that had a 10 million budget. I've worked on projects that had a 10 million budget to make the entire game, right? And I've worked on projects where the budget was 7 million per month for a period of time. So it's it's really about team size, the costs over there. It depends if you have a proprietary engine or if you're using a public engine, because there's licensing costs that get involved. It depends on the tools that you use, team sizes, how many studios at one time work on that. Are you also doing co-development? Are you also using outsourcing? Do you have your own QA department, or are you outsourcing your QA department? It's so many costs, and I wouldn't know. And I'm sure that so I think the only fun fact that anyone can get out of this is 7 million per month is a very high budget. That already implies a very high budget. That's 84 million a year, right? And we said that at least 3 years of development. That's 252 million per year for assuming minimum of 3 years of development, right? That's a lot of money. That's a whole lot of money.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I can just like think what you do with that money, but um,
Normally, you pay salaries. With a
yeah,
lot of that money, you pay salaries.
yeah. So, should a solo developer still use a game design document?
It really, it really depends. Normally, I wouldn't say that you need. I gave an example earlier of high pitch, high level pitch of an idea, and really low level detailed in stage two. It's nice to put your thoughts on paper so that you establish what your game is without having any sort of document that guides you. By a document that guides you could be something like 10 levels, 5 enemies, 10 spells. And this is your restriction, this is your specification, at least to start working on the game. If you don't have something like this, you'll just scope creep continuously because you have no limits, right? And because you have no limits, oh, you know what? I actually want a dragon. I actually want a race car. I actually want, I don't know, RTS building mechanics in this. Oh, I actually want first person survival you know, you can just lose track of things. So don't as a solo developer, because you are the creative vision and you are also the person doing the implementation, you have full control over it. But I would suggest, you know, get a good idea of what you want to try to make. You can change it as you go on. You can add stuff, you can modify your original design intent, but make sure you lay down some design foundation, because otherwise you run the risk of scope creeping or creep scoping. I don't know.
Scope creeping, I think. Yeah, but yeah, it's. I think it's like this problem. We discussed about it already a lot of times, and it's real, and it's killing a lot of projects. Um, how much more difficult is AAA compared to AA? And, probably, I mean, this question, like, I don't think it's more difficult in terms of like how you make the game. It's more difficult in how you manage bigger teams because that's what
Yeah,
you'll be getting
yeah,
out of.
yeah.
Like you'll get a much higher team, a higher number of people in the team, and you need more managers that spend a lot of times in calls, in meetings, and just try to make sure that everyone is working on the right thing, right?
Yeah, so that's definitely, I think, the biggest difference. Another difference might be usually AAA games launch on many platforms, more or less around the same time at release. So doing something like PC, current gen, next gen, previous gen, oh, let's put it on Switch as well, that has a lot of challenges in itself. Because you need to design something that when it comes to memory costs, it should. So let's take it for example the what is the name of the series called? It's some a series that's called Warriors and something, where you're the main character and you're fighting like hundreds of enemies at the same time. It's a third person action game. I can't remember the exact name, but you can imagine having 200 or 300 enemies on screen. That's a technical challenge. That's 3D, right? With animations, with AI, that's a technical challenge. So probably when you make certain design decisions, maybe you say, okay, we will have 200 enemies that you fight on screen, but maybe the AI is slightly dumb, so that we do, because we want to release it, for example, on the Switch, we need to make the AI do low computational stuff in order to fit it in the memory. We can't sacrifice the art because then it'll look bad. We can't sacrifice the number of people on screen too much because then somebody that plays it on PC will look at the Switch version and they'll be like, why is this such a worse version of the game? You need to try to make version parity between the platforms. And this comes with a lot of challenges. And then probably the another difference would be being in AAA, you have certain access to technology strictly because you have the money to use to get better technology, more latest, up to date, whatever it is. And it could be tough because uh, you've worked 5 years on a project for something, and now for the next project, even for the sequel for that project, now you have to incorporate this new piece of technology which is really cool, really difficult, really without documentation, to be fair, because it's so hot and fresh, and you've got to make it work. And you've got to integrate it in the game, and it's got to be good. I think these would be the challenges. But definitely going from 200 people total to 600 people is one of the bigger challenges.
Yeah, makes sense.
Biggest differences, sorry.
Okay. What have you learned from the AAA game industry that you would have not learned from being indie game developer?
Pipelines. What is the most efficient way to get something from scratch to in game? Throughout my experience, throughout my career, the two things that I've most appreciated is seeing different ways of doing things, different engines, different structures behind the scenes, different way in which I don't know, you can even approve design. Maybe this needs three types of approval because of a certain reason it actually needs those three types. Maybe on a smaller project it works only if you only have this one type of approval. How in depth do you go on documentation based on team size, based on project size and stuff like this? And just seeing the pipelines, I think this is going to be the thing that's, I don't know, has made me a better designer. Because even when I go to another company, they might have a different pipeline, right? Which isn't to say that it's better or worse, but if by any chance that pipeline has certain failures in it, because I already have experience from other companies, I can advise them, guys, if you try to do things like this, like this, like this, it actually increases efficiency by 70%. And that's cool. So that's one thing that I really like throughout my career. You know, like the things that I've learned, and especially AAA because they have to manage so many teams that are so big, and the cost is so big. The rules are way more clearer. In an indie company, people don't necessarily care about procedures. People don't necessarily care about game design documents to the extent that we care over here. You know, like you really make them pretty, you make them nice because you understand that psychologically the reader will not want to read it if it's just plain word text in front of you, right? So I actually have to do, it's in Italian, it's captatio benevolenza or benevolenza, which is a technique when writing, that the press uses when writing stuff to captivate the reader, to make them want to read the entire article. It's all kinds of techniques, and you do that. And the second thing that I've loved is getting to meet people. I've worked with people that worked on The Witcher, on Crisis, on whatever, whatever at this point, on Star Wars, on Need for Speed, and the amount of knowledge that they have and the experience that they bring. I've worked with people from Dice, really talented people from Dice, and it's been amazing meeting these people throughout my journey and learning from them, even though maybe they're not on game design. Most likely they're not on game design, but just learning from their experience and sharing, you know, like stories about their projects. Um, why did uh, why did that game not do well from this perspective, from the cutscenes perspectives? Oh, and when talking to the person, they tell you, oh, our cutscene editor couldn't handle dynamic collision. So, and then you kind of realize, wow, now it makes sense because with this piece of information, and it's all of this combined knowledge that gets together. It just blows your mind when you hear the war stories that happen in the background from other companies and other projects.
Yeah, this seems like a really cool experience, and I've been to a couple of game development conferences, and I can tell like the learn and also the networking that you can get out of them is crazy. Like it's just so much fun, and you get to meet a lot of people, and I don't know the context of your meetups. Probably the same kind, like in expos or different places where you could like show the games, or I don't know. But
Sorry,
like,
what is the question?
how did you meet like the people? Like how did the network to network with them? Like did you meet them in different like conferences or like E3 or what kind of setup?
Normally, I'd love to go to conferences. Sadly, I haven't. gone to conferences. I have went to press conferences, as in press events that I've had to do, but never to actually Gamescom or E3. I've met them, like when changing company, you get to meet
Uh-huh.
people that got there for
So in the companies, yeah.
yeah.
So you stay even more time with them and learn from their war stories.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah. Actually, I had a funny story. I met a guy that was also Romanian, like me, and he was shocked when he saw my name when the email came in the company with the new hires, and he saw a Romanian. He was like, "Oh my God, you're Romanian!" And I'm like, "Yes. Why? I've never met a Romanian in the industry, and I've been working in the industry for 12 years." And I'm like, mate, you've been super unlucky because just at my last company, we were like 9 Romanians over there. We almost had a mini club going on,
uh,
and and yeah, over here, of course, I meet you as well. So I keep seeing. I've never seen them, and I'm like, so where have you worked at before? So I've worked 8 years at Blizzard at World of Warcraft. I was their server engineer, and I'm like, what the what? And it's like these kinds of super cool stuff that, and of course we got into talks. What did you work on? I worked on this. What did you work on? I worked on this. Oh, that thing was really cool. Yeah, but that thing was super cool. It's super awesome to do these kinds of things.
yeah. Yeah. So for anyone thinking of going into AAA, this is what to expect.
Yeah.
Awesome stories. And as a wrap up, what would be your advice for people that are considering breaking into this AAA industry?
If someone would want to break in from scratch, that would mean that they would have to apply to a junior role. Please be careful. There are 3 types of roles for a designer in terms of hierarchy: junior, mid, and senior. Usually, we do not put mid on the role, on the job posting, so you will see it as game designer. When you see game designer, that doesn't mean junior, that means mid. So that usually has years of experience. But you probably will want to apply for a junior role. For a junior role, please understand that usually there's like 200, 300 people that apply for junior roles because they're quite rare. And usually a lot of people that want to jump in, obviously jump in from the junior role. If you have a portfolio, you're already in the top 10%. So if you just apply with a CV and you think you want to make games, you're probably not going to get selected because of the amount of people that apply. But if if you've worked in a team, or if you can work in a team and put a prototype together of something, anything of any quality, it can be circles and spheres and whatnot. You can grab free assets from the asset store, from Unity or Unreal or whatever engine you want to use. If you can show me some work that you can put in a portfolio and have the link over there, you're already in the top 10%. If you want higher chances of getting at a particular studio, the way that I usually advise people, and I've managed to get 2 people into game design from scratch, like they had no programming experience, no previous game dev experience. I told them, pick 3 companies where you would like to get to. From those 3 companies, check to see if they have any job openings for juniors right now. You shouldn't apply. You just need to look at the requirements. In the requirements, check to see if they have an engine preference. Some companies will say, "Oh, would very much appreciate Unity experience in Unity," or other people will say, other jobs, other companies will say Unreal experience. I think somebody sent me a link. There's a mid-level position at GameLoft Bucharest, and they're looking for Unreal Engine, right? So if you can see an opening like that, check to see the requirements, and if you can, try to make some prototypes in that particular engine, right? If you can show me that uh, you know the engine that we're already working in internally, or an engine that's close to what we're working internally, like if we have a proprietary engine, we'll probably try to pick the best public engine on the market that resembles our engine, and we'll put that in the descriptions. So show me a prototype. That's plus 10 points. Is the prototype in the engine that we need? That's plus 10 points. And here is the kicker. If you can guess, or if you can get information of what kind of game it is. Say, for example, the company wants to hire a junior game designer for a third person action adventure game, right? If your prototype has anything to do with third person action, that's plus 50 points.
Okay.
So this is how you gain the points. You must have a portfolio. Otherwise, personally, I will not hire you if it's up to me. I will not hire. I don't look at anyone that doesn't have a portfolio with so many resources online and so many guides and tutorials on YouTube. It is unexcusable for somebody to not be able to pick up any engine. Any engine. It can be whatever. Like, I really do not care. I do not have any engine preferences. I need to see you understand the workflow that's assumed in game dev. A lot of people think that because they play games and they like playing games, that they also like making games. Totally, totally different stuff. So yeah, portfolio, preferably in our engine. But if it's not in our engine, it doesn't matter that much. It's cool. It makes me understand that if I hire you, I don't have to spend that much time training you, right? And whatever benefits like this you can show me, of course, I'm more interested in you as a candidate. And then if you show me, for example, let's say we're working on the third person action adventure, and you make this cylinder guy with a gun from the asset store that you picked up, but it's in a third person, and you show me a nice camera shake whenever it shoots, that actually feels nice. Even though it's a cylinder that has a gun attached to it, I already like that. I already know where I could use your particular skills in our development pipeline. So that's why I'm saying if you can actually match the engine and the genre, that's so many points.
Yeah, this is golden advice, and I think this works in a lot of other cases. I think getting investors as well, like going with a portfolio and going with the right thing that they are looking for, regardless if it's a company or an investor or something else, then your chances increase dramatically. And just hearing that you're in top 10% with a portfolio, I mean, you just do some game jams and you already have a portfolio. Of course, you can do more than that, but the bare minimum that you can do is just make a couple of games, and boom, you're like better than 90% of the people that are applying to that
Yeah,
position.
yeah.
So it's
And that's the
crazy.
thing. You're better than 90% at that point.
I mean, like the chances, you increase your chances. Yeah,
Yep.
very good advice. Thanks for that. Let's take one last question from the chat. So X-Ray
Sure.
asks, could you get the mid level role as a successful solo developer without any AAA experience?
Potentially, yes, if you've worked in the same engine. So let's say you're working in whatever Unity or Unreal, and the AAA studio actually uses Unity or Unreal, you could potentially get a mid-level role. If they have a proprietary engine, the conversation gets fuzzy really fast, because while you are experienced as a solo dev, they're not sure about your skill set and how much training you would need to understand that engine. Maybe you've mastered, um, let's say, Unity. You've mastered Unity, but it took you 10 years to get there. Not mastered. Sorry, you became proficient, but it took you like 1 year or 2 years or 3 years to become slightly proficient. We do not have that time to train you. We probably at most are looking at up to 3 months of training in AAA, and that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could potentially see it as possible. If the engine is slightly similar, I could say yes. But when you say successful solo developer, what does successful mean to you? Like, if you've launched the Beast title, yeah, people will hire you no matter what. If it's a beast, it's a beast, and we all know about it already. And yeah,
Yeah, and it's and I don't know, like successful. It's also like fuzzy, like the term successful. I mean, like your definition of successful can be totally different from other people. What I found out was a lot of studios are actually asking for you to have published projects, not to have just projects, but to have published projects, or at least have like published 3 mobile games or published 1 AAA game, like worked on. Like you should have worked on a AAA game, let's say. But probably that's not for entry level.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
definitely mid and above. Yep.
Ah,
The
yeah,
the
okay.
the, the list just the list of requirements just gets more intensive the higher up you go. I remember I wanted to apply for a role of my seniority, and the guys were like, "Yeah, we require 12 years of experience and 5 AAA projects launched." Oh, dear Lord, that's a lot. You guys are not messing around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think we can wrap up right now. Thank you, Alex, for accepting this invitation. There is a lot of great advice, a lot of solid advice, and a lot of information how AAA game studios work in here. It's also, as Sosasis pointed out, there are a lot of similar things with indie, and also some different stuff like the pipelines that you mentioned, and also like the hiring process, which is much more complex than that. What to say? Yeah, thank you, and looking forward for next one.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. It's really fun when we get these chances to talk a lot, and I know in theory we could spend tens of hours in talking about this. Thank you for having me. I hope even if 1% of what I said helped anyone, keep cracking at it. And I think my word of advice is when I'm looking for a new job, right? So I made it in AAA. When I'm changing jobs, I usually apply in 30 places, get 7 replies, and out of the 7 replies, I managed to pass only 2 for 2 roles, right? It's a grind, it's a process, and especially for the first job, that's the hardest bit that you can that's the hardest step you have to make. Once you get your first job in game dev, everything is easy. The recruiters will spam you on LinkedIn like crazy, but up until then, you will face a mountain. And if you're really passionate, just don't give up. Don't give up on that mountain. Hard work, prototype,
Do
have
it.
a portfolio, and you'll get there. I promise.
Nice, nice, awesome. Okay, Alex, I'll do the outro and then come back to you just in a second. Okay. So everyone, this is it for today. I hope you got some really solid stuff out of this talk. If you like this event, be sure to check out others as well, because we have much more stuff going on. And also the jam is starting very soon, so you should definitely check out the itch.io page. And if you haven't yet joined, you should join, because we are aiming for #1 on the first page. I'm Adrian, your host, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a nice day. Bye.